By the end of this video, my aim is to convince you that God exists. And I'm going to do it only by using a single law of physics, one of the most well-established, well-understood, and most fundamental laws of physics, called the Law of Entropy, otherwise known as the Second Law of Thermodynamics. And so there can be no accusations of disinformation, misrepresentation, or sleight of hand. I'm going to call on an expert to explain what it is. Here's Professor Brian Cox to explain the Law of Entropy.
We're able to look very far back into the past, but we can't see into the future. Which raises the question, what is the difference between the two? Why does time appear to flow only in one direction? This question has puzzled many of science's greatest minds. All the laws of nature that we have today that we consider to be fundamental, so Einstein's equations, or Newton's laws for that matter, all of them make no distinction in the direction of the flow of time, if you like. There's only one law of physics that has an explicit direction of time in it, and that law is concerned with something called entropy. Entropy explains why, left to the mercy of the elements, mortar crumbles, glass shatters, and buildings collapse. And a good way to understand how is to think of objects not as single things, but as being made up of many constituent parts, like the individual grains that make up this pile of sand. Now, entropy is a measure of how many ways I can rearrange those grains and still keep the sand pile the same. And there are trillions and trillions and trillions of ways of doing that. I mean, pretty much anything I do to this sand pile, if I mess the sand around and move it around, then it doesn't change the shape or the structure at all. So, in the language of entropy, this sand pile has high entropy because there are many, many ways that I can rearrange its constituents and not change it. But now let me create some order in the universe. Now there are approximately as many sand grains in this sandcastle as there are in the sand pile. But now virtually anything I do to it will mess it up, will remove the beautiful order from this structure. And because of that, the sandcastle has a low entropy. It's a much more ordered state. So many ways of rearranging the sand grains without changing the structure, high entropy. Very few ways of rearranging the sand grains without changing the structure, without disordering it, low entropy. Now imagine I was to leave this castle in the desert all day. Then it's obvious what's going to happen. The desert winds are going to blow the sand around and this castle is going to disintegrate. It's going to become less ordered. It's going to fall to bits. But think about what's happening on the fundamental level. I mean, the wind is taking the sand off the castle and blowing it over there somewhere and making a sand pile. There's nothing fundamental in the laws of physics that says that the wind couldn't pick up some sand from over here, deposit it here, and deposit it in precisely the shape of a sandcastle. You know, in principle, the wind could spontaneously build a sandcastle out of a pile of sand. There's no reason why that couldn't happen. It's just extremely, extremely unlikely because there are very few ways of organising this sand so that it looks like a castle. It's overwhelmingly more likely that when the wind blows the sand around, it will take the low entropy structure, the castle, and turn it into a high entropy structure, the sand pile. So entropy always increases. Why is that? Because it's overwhelmingly more likely that it will.
The law of entropy says that the universe will always move from order to chaos, because chaos is overwhelmingly more likely. Which is why whenever we see order in the universe, low entropy objects, we instinctively understand that nature almost certainly did not create it. If we came across this sandcastle in the desert, we would intuitively know that elements did not create that because it's simply too ordered. It is too low entropy. The same goes for this house in the background. It is too ordered to have happened by chance. And the same goes for this mouse and this pen and this microphone. We know these things are not created by nature because they are too low entropy, they are too ordered, they are too designed. Instead, we understand there had to have been some kind of intervention here, some kind of intelligence, some mind has been at work in the creation of these things. Notice that it was Professor Cox who brought this sandcastle into being in the desert. And if we were to walk past after they'd filmed and left, we would know a human being had been there in the recent past because we would see this low entropy object and understand that couldn't have formed by natural processes. A human had to have been there. And we could probably even guess how recently they were there based on how disordered it had then become. Because the law of entropy says that everything will return to chaos. Entropy always increases. Left to the elements, the sandcastle will gradually lose its form and return to a mound of sand. Left to nature, the house will gradually crumble and return to dust. The mouse, the pen, the microphone, all of these things will gradually degrade and break and need replacing over time. So this is always the process. Intelligence creates form and then nature gradually dissolves it and returns it to chaos. We build a car and then it rusts and breaks down and needs to be scrapped in the end. We build trains and planes and the same thing gradually happens. The universe by itself does not produce order. Intelligence produces order, and the law of entropy gradually then dissolves it. Now, it's at this point that I want us to take a look at ourselves. No, really, take a look at yourself, because you are a low entropy object. You are a highly ordered being. And what does that suggest? It suggests you were created. Yes, the law of entropy means that you will gradually age and die, but in the first place, your order, your low entropy form, overwhelmingly suggests that you were created. To say the universe formed your order is to contradict the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy. It's like saying a sandcastle could form by chance in the desert. In fact, it's much more extreme than that because human beings are far more complex than sandcastles, of course. Fred Hoyle once said, it's like believing a tornado could sweep through a junkyard and create a jumbo jet. But even that doesn't quite hit the mark. The fact that we are so highly ordered overwhelmingly suggests that we, and indeed all living beings, were designed.
The second law of thermodynamics, for me, demonstrates everything that is powerful and beautiful and profound about physics. You see, here's a law that entered science as a way of talking about how heat moves around and the efficiency of steam engines. But it ended up being able to explain one of the great mysteries in the history of science. Why is there a difference between the past and the future? See, the second law says that everything tends from order to disorder. That means that there is a difference between the past and the future. In the past, the universe was more ordered, and in the future, the universe will be less ordered. And that means that there's a direction to the passage of time. So the second law of thermodynamics has introduced the concept of an arrow of time into science. The so-called thermodynamic arrow of time, this idea that entropy always increases, is well understood. But actually its origin at a deep level is not so clear. The reason seems to be something to do with the origin of the universe itself and the presence of this strange thing called the Big Bang way back in our past. Why were things in the past so beautifully ordered that the universe can fall to bits gently And in the process, in the transition from order to disorder, these tremendous structures of which we are the most magnificent example can exist for a brief time in the universe.
Why was the universe so beautifully ordered at its inception? What accounts for this when the laws of physics themselves tend towards disorder and chaos? And even as the universe now gently falls to bits, why is it that we, these highly ordered, highly structured beings, get to exist at all within it and be a part of it? Atheistic scientists can't explain this. They know that it was something to do with the Big Bang, but they're not entirely sure what it was to bring such beauty and order, or at least they're not ready to admit what it was that brought such beauty and order. Of course, theistic scientists or Christian scientists know exactly what was going on here. They understand that the term Big Bang, which is so often used to describe this event, is not really accurate or adequate, because a bang suggests something chaotic, an explosion, and explosions tend to destroy. What actually took place at the dawn of time was more like a big, beautiful design event or construction event, because it actually created the most beautiful order the universe has ever had and ever will have. Now remember, intelligence is what brings order. So in the Bible, in Genesis 1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty." The rest of the chapter then describes how God himself brought beautiful form and order into his creation. The Psalms say, "For when he spoke, the world began. It appeared at his command." Hebrews says, "By faith we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen." The Bible describes a God who exists outside of the entire space-time continuum, outside of our entire universe, forming this place and crafting it with all of its beauty at his command. The Bible then says that that creation fell, and that's what means the whole thing is now gradually moving towards disorder and chaos. But it was God who brought the initial design, and that's what explains it. Now, that worldview that God created order and now it's collapsing is far more aligned to the laws of physics and to science and the Second Law of Thermodynamics than this idea that nature started chaotic and without form, but has gradually brought form and order to itself completely unguided. That idea is a contradiction. It's an inversion of the law of entropy. Now, there's all kinds of interesting avenues to explore from this. For example, if the further back in time you go, the more ordered things become, that suggests that the human genome was far more ordered the further back you go, meaning that the earliest humans were likely far stronger and more intelligent, and dare I say it, far more beautiful than us, to a degree that may almost seem superhuman. The first humans would have these capabilities far, far beyond ours. They would seem almost superhuman to us. So it's interesting that Genesis describes the earliest humans having much longer lifespans than us, for example, living for hundreds and hundreds of years, and seemingly able to build cities and structures that are far beyond our comprehension. So that's just one consideration of how this all plays out. But that's for another day. I won't get into that here. I'll leave you with this. Why is it that the universe was created so beautifully and with so much order when there's nothing within the laws of physics itself to produce that beautiful order? In fact, the laws of physics would tend to suggest the opposite. I put it to you that it's because God was the creator of the heavens and the earth.